The massive fleet hung in the darkness of space like a monument to terror itself. 300 warships from the Galactic Hegemony Council stretched across the border of human territory, each vessel larger than anything humanity had ever built. The ships were not just machines of war, they were designed to break the spirit of any species that saw them. Grand Admiral Zixthara stood on the command bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion. His 4 eyes scanned the view screens with satisfaction. Everything was proceeding according to the standard protocol that had worked for 50,000 years. The protocol was simple. Show overwhelming force, demonstrate past victories, and watch the new species crumble before a single shot was fired. The hulls of the hegemony ships were decorated with the bones and skulls of defeated species. Massive banners, made from the flags of conquered worlds, hung between the weapons arrays, each ship broadcast on specific frequencies, transmitting the recorded final screams and pleas for mercy from hundreds of civilizations that no longer existed. It was psychological warfare perfected over millennia. "The human diplomatic vessel is approaching," reported his second officer, a thin Vexalian, whose skin changed colors with emotion. Currently, it showed the confident purple of anticipated victory. Zixthara allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The humans were a young species, barely 200 years into space travel. They had spread across a mere 30 systems, building modest colonies and trade routes. Their technology was adequate, but unremarkable. Their military consisted of patrol ships and defensive platforms, nothing that could challenge even a single hegemony dreadnought. The human diplomatic ship was tiny compared to the surrounding armada. It looked like a small fish swimming toward a school of predators. The vessel was clean and functional, with none of the elaborate decorations or intimidation displays that most species adopted once they reached space. It simply existed, plain and almost boring in its efficiency. "Open a channel," Zixthara commanded. "Let us begin the ritual of submission." The view screen shifted to show the interior of the human ship. A man in a simple military uniform appeared. He had dark hair and calm eyes that seemed to take in everything without reaction. His name, according to the intelligence reports, was Captain Park Minjun, a mid-level diplomat and military officer. "Captain Park," Zixthara began, his voice resonating with the deep authority that made most species tremble. "You stand before the assembled might of the Galactic Hegemony Council. We represent 4,000 species and control 70,000 worlds. You will observe what awaits those who refuse to join us." With a gesture, Zixthara activated the holographic display system. Images filled the space between the ships, massive 3-dimensional recordings that showed world after world falling to hegemony forces. Cities burning, populations fleeing, leaders kneeling in surrender. The recordings were carefully selected for maximum psychological impact. They showed species begging for their children to be spared. They showed proud warrior races, throwing down their weapons in despair. They showed the moment when hope died in the eyes of those who realized they could not win. Zixthara watched Captain Park's face carefully. This was the moment when most species broke. Their representatives would begin to shake, to sweat, to show the physical signs of overwhelming fear. Some would cry. Some would try to maintain dignity, while their bodies betrayed their terror. All would understand that resistance was futile. But Captain Park's expression was strange. His lips pressed together tightly, as if he was trying to hold something in. His shoulders seemed to shake slightly. Was this a human fear response? The intelligence reports had been unclear about human physical reactions to stress. "You see before you the fate of defiance," Zixthara continued, warming to his speech. He had delivered variations of this message hundreds of times. The hegemony offers a choice. Submit peacefully. Accept our guidance and protection, and your species will be allowed to continue. Refuse, and you will join the ash of history. Your worlds will be examples for the next species that considers resistance. Captain Park raised one hand to his mouth, coughing slightly. His face was turning red. "Yes, This must be fear. The human was trying to maintain composure, while his body betrayed his terror. We have destroyed species with technology far beyond yours, Zixthara pressed on. We have broken empires that ruled for 10,000 years before your species learned to make fire. We have turned the homeworlds of defiant races into lifeless rocks that serve as navigation warnings for others. What makes you think humanity could succeed where so many others have failed? The recordings shifted to show the skull decorations on the hegemony ships in detail. Each skull was from a species that had refused to submit. They were preserved and displayed as permanent reminders of the cost of defiance. The camera zoomed in on specific examples, showing the diversity of life that had been extinguished. Captain Park's shoulders were definitely shaking now. He seemed to be having trouble breathing. His face was very red, and his eyes were watering. "I must," Park said, his voice strained. "I must request a recess to consult with Earth. This is a significant decision that requires input from my government." Perfect, Zixthara thought. The human could barely speak from fear. He was buying time, hoping desperately that somehow his leaders would find a way out of this impossible situation. They never did. "You have 12 of your Earth hours," Zixthara declared magnanimously. "We will await your response here. Observe our fleet well, Captain Park. Count our ships. Study our weapons. Understand that what you see is merely a fraction of our power. Then return with your answer." The communication ended. Captain Park's image disappeared from the view screen. Zixthara turned to his officers, satisfaction evident in his posture. "Another species learns its place in the galaxy. Begin the next phase. I want all ships to activate their full intimidation arrays. Let the humans see what awaits them in every direction they look. When their captain returns, he will bring unconditional surrender." The bridge crew moved efficiently to carry out his orders. Across the Armada, more weapon systems powered up for display. More recordings of defeated enemies began broadcasting. More ships moved into formation to create an inescapable wall of military might. What Zixthara did not know was that aboard the human diplomatic vessel, Captain Park Min-jun had finally allowed himself to do what he had been desperately holding back during the entire communication. He burst into laughter so hard that tears ran down his face. Captain Park Min-jun tried to compose himself. But every time he looked at the recordings his crew had made of the hegemony fleet, he started laughing again. Around him, the rest of the diplomatic vessel's crew were having similar problems. "Sir," said Lieutenant Chen, wiping tears from her eyes, "we need to send our report to Earth Command. But I cannot stop watching this. Did you see the skeleton decorations? They look like they bought them from a discount Halloween store." Park nodded, taking deep breaths to calm himself. I know. But we have to be professional about this. They are clearly serious. Even if they look ridiculous to us." He opened a secure channel to Earth. Within minutes, the faces of several high-ranking military officials and government leaders appeared on his screen. Park delivered his report as professionally as he could manage, describing the hegemony fleet, their demands, and their intimidation display. There was a long silence after he finished. Then, from Earth, someone started giggling. Within seconds, the entire command center on Earth had erupted into laughter. "I am sorry, Captain Park," said Admiral Kim, trying to control herself. "But did they really think the skulls would scare us? Do they not understand human culture at all?" "Apparently not, Admiral," Park replied. "They seemed very proud of their display. I think it genuinely works on other species." "Of course it does," said Dr. Sarah Martinez, the xenopsychology expert who had joined the call. "Most species that reach space travel did so through cooperation and collective effort. They tend to be naturally more cautious, more community-focused. The idea of death, especially violent death, carries significant psychological weight for them." She pulled up some data on her screen. "Humans are unusual. We are one of the few apex predator species to achieve spaceflight. We evolved hunting and being hunted. Death is familiar to us. We have spent our entire cultural history making art about it, telling stories about it, and yes, even making entertainment about it. So their intimidation display hits our cultural blind spot, Park said. Worse than that, Martinez continued. It hits what we find amusing. The trying to be scary aesthetic is something we have developed entire entertainment industries around. Horror movies, Halloween, haunted houses, scary stories around campfires. We actively seek out controlled fear experiences for fun. Reason. On Earth, more human ships were being prepared to join Park's vessel. The response fleet was not a military armada. It was a standard diplomatic and observation force, designed to study the hegemony and establish communication protocols. Nobody on Earth actually believed the hegemony would attack. If they wanted to destroy humanity, they would have done so already, not wasted time with elaborate theatrical displays. The human ships began arriving at the border over the next few hours. Each one that arrived had crew members who immediately started taking pictures of the hegemony fleet. The images spread across human communication networks rapidly. On the Eternal Dominion, Grand Admiral Zixthara was becoming increasingly confused and disturbed. His intelligence officers had intercepted human communications, and what they found made no sense. Admiral, his communication specialist reported, her voice uncertain. The humans are broadcasting on open channels. They are not encrypted military communications. They appear to be social exchanges. Show me. Zixthara commanded, the main screen filled with intercepted human transmissions. Zixthara watched in growing bewilderment as human crew members shared images of his fleet with captions like, "Best haunted house setup ever," and "These guys take Halloween really seriously." There were comparisons to something called theme park decorations, and references to trying too hard to be edgy. One particularly popular image showed a close-up of the skull decorations on a hegemony dreadnought with a human text overlay reading, "When you order your intimidating space fleet from the discount store, what is Halloween?" Zixthara demanded. His xenocultural advisor, a Peltharian scholar who had studied dozens of species, pulled up information on human culture. What he found only deepened the confusion. Admiral, Halloween is a human cultural celebration where they voluntarily dress up as frightening creatures and decorate their environments with death imagery for entertainment purposes. It appears to be primarily aimed at their children as a fun activity. Zixthara felt something he had not experienced in decades of military service: complete bewilderment. They make their children celebrate death symbols? As entertainment? It appears so, Admiral. They also have something called haunted houses, where they pay currency to have other humans jump out and try to frighten them in controlled environments. They consider this enjoyable recreation. Another officer spoke up. "Admiral, we are receiving a transmission request from Captain Park. He says he is ready to deliver humanity's response." Zixthara straightened himself, pushing away the confusion. Perhaps the humans were using humor as a coping mechanism for their fear. He had seen that before in some species. They would laugh or make jokes to hide their terror. "Yes, that must be it. Open the channel," he commanded. Captain Park appeared again. And this time, his composure was better. He looked professional and diplomatic, though there was still a strange lightness in his expression. "Grand Admiral Zixthara," Park began formally, "I have consulted with Earth, and we have prepared our response to your ultimatum. However, before I deliver it, I have been asked to seek clarification on a cultural matter." "Speak," Zixthara said. "Your fleet displays are very elaborate and clearly required significant effort and planning. We want to make sure we understand their intent correctly. Are they meant to be frightening?" The question was so unexpected that Zixthara did not know how to respond for a moment. "Of course they are meant to be frightening. They display the fate of all who oppose the hegemony." Park nodded slowly. "I see. Grand Admiral, I need to inform you of a cultural difference that may be causing some confusion. Humans have a different psychological response to death imagery and intimidation displays than you may be expecting. He gestured, and images appeared on the shared screen. They showed human children dressed in skeleton costumes, smiling and carrying bags of candy. They showed elaborate decorations of fake graveyards in front of human homes. They showed people laughing as they walked through dark buildings where actors jumped out to scare them. "This is Halloween," Park explained gently. "One of our major cultural celebrations. We decorate with skulls and death imagery as entertainment. We actively seek out experiences designed to frighten us because we find them enjoyable when we know they are not real threats." More images appeared. These showed human horror movies, with titles like Alien Invasion and Space Monsters. They showed book covers for scary stories. They showed theme park attractions with elaborate monster displays. "We have entire industries dedicated to creating scary imagery for entertainment purposes," Park continued. "Our psychological response to things that look scary but are not actually dangerous is not fear. It is pattern recognition that tells us the threat is not real, which often results in amusement." Zixthara stared at the images, his mind struggling to process this information. "You are saying that our fleet displays, perfected over 50,000 years, appear to you as entertainment?" Park's expression became sympathetic. "I am saying that they hit a very specific cultural blind spot for humans. We recognize them as trying to be frightening, but that recognition itself tells us they are not actually dangerous. Dangerous things do not waste time trying to look scary. They simply act." Around the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, officers exchanged confused looks. Their ultimate weapon, the intimidation protocol that had brought countless species to submission without firing a shot, was useless against these strange predator descendants, who had turned fear itself into entertainment. Grand Admiral Zixthara felt something dangerous rising inside him. It was not fear or confusion anymore. It was anger, mixed with humiliation. His perfect protocol, the method that had brought thousands of species to their knees, was being treated as a joke by these primitive humans. "Enough," he said, his voice cutting through the bridge. "If they do not fear our symbols, they will fear our power. Activate all weapon systems. We will demonstrate what real force looks like." Across the hegemony fleet, massive weapons came online. Planetary siege cannons that could crack the crust of a world emerged from hidden bays. Antimatter torpedo tubes opened, revealing warheads that could destroy entire fleets. Quantum destabilizers charged up, weapons so powerful they could tear apart the fabric of space itself. "Target the uninhabited moon in this system," Zixthara commanded. "Let the humans see what awaits their worlds if they continue to mock us." The hegemony fleet fired as one. The moon that had orbited peacefully for billions of years simply ceased to exist. The siege cannons shattered it into dust. The antimatter warheads consumed the fragments. The quantum destabilizers erased what remained, leaving nothing but empty space where a celestial body had been. "Again," Zixthara ordered. "Target the asteroids in the belt." More demonstrations of power followed. Each one was carefully calculated to show a different aspect of hegemony military technology. The weapons could destroy, disintegrate, or completely erase targets from existence. It was a display of such overwhelming force that most species would immediately begin surrender negotiations. On the human ships, the reaction was not what Zixthara expected. "Did you see the containment field configuration on that antimatter warhead?" One human engineer was broadcasting on an open channel. "The magnetic bottle design is actually more efficient than our current models. Focus on the quantum destabilizer," another voice replied excitedly. "They are using a cascade effect to multiply the dimensional tier. I need to get this data to the physics department at New Cambridge." "Recording everything?" a third human confirmed. "This is better than any weapons demonstration our own military has ever done. We are getting complete operational data on every system they are using." Zixthara listened to these transmissions with growing disbelief. The humans were not terrified. They were excited. They were studying the weapons like students at an academy, analyzing the technology with professional interest rather than existential dread. Explain this, he demanded of his xenocultural advisor. The Peltharian scholar was reviewing human cultural data frantically. Admiral, it appears that humans have a strong cultural tendency toward what they call reverse engineering and problem solving. Their entire technological advancement has been based on seeing something complex and figuring out how it works. That is how all species develop technology, Zixthara said impatiently. Yes, but humans take it further. They view impressive technology not as proof of their inferiority, but as a challenge to understand and eventually overcome. Their entire space program was reverse engineered from theoretical physics. They built their first faster-than-light drive by studying natural phenomena and working backward to understand the principles. Another officer added a troubling detail. Admiral, we are receiving formal requests from 3 human research stations. They are asking if they can examine any unexploded hegemony ordnance for academic purposes. They want to study our weapons? Zixthara could not believe what he was hearing. It appears so. One message says, and I quote, "The antimatter containment system you demonstrated would solve several problems our engineering corps has been working on. Would it be possible to examine an intact example?" Captain Park's face appeared on the communication screen again, unbidden. He looked slightly embarrassed. Grand Admiral, I apologize for the enthusiasm of our scientific community. Your weapons demonstration was indeed impressive from a technical standpoint. However, I have been asked to clarify something about human psychology that may help explain our reaction. Zixthara said nothing, simply staring at the human who had somehow turned his ultimate show of force into an academic presentation. Humans are what xenobiologists classify as persistence predators, Park explained. We evolved on a world that was actively trying to kill us. Our planet has extreme weather, aggressive fauna, diseases that adapt faster than most species can handle, and natural disasters that regularly reshape entire continents. Images appeared showing Earth, massive storms that could flatten cities, volcanoes that blocked out the sun, earthquakes that tore the ground apart, floods that consumed entire regions. It was a violent, dangerous world. To survive on Earth, humans developed a specific psychological trait, Park continued. We view obstacles and dangers not as reasons to give up, but as problems to solve. When we see something powerful or dangerous, our instinct is not to run away. Our instinct is to understand it, figure out how it works, and find a way to overcome it. More images showed human history. Humans climbing the tallest mountains just to prove they could. Humans diving to the deepest ocean trenches to see what was there. Humans launching themselves into space before they had proven it was safe, just to find out what would happen. We also developed very specific threat recognition, Park said. Things that look scary, but are performative, do not register as real threats. Real threats on Earth do not waste time trying to intimidate. A predator does not roar before it attacks. A storm does not announce itself with dramatic displays. Real danger simply acts. Zixthara felt something cold settling in his chest. You are saying that our demonstrations prove we are not a real threat? I am saying that your demonstrations prove you are trying to avoid actual conflict, Park replied carefully. Species that truly intend to destroy others do not spend time showing off their weapons. They simply use them. Your elaborate displays tell us that you would prefer submission without battle, which means you view battle as costly, even for you. The Peltharian advisor was nodding slowly. He is correct, Admiral. Our entire protocol is designed to avoid actual combat, because combat is expensive and risky, even for us. We have never encountered a species that could read that intent from our actions. Furthermore, Park continued, humans have been the apex predator on our world for hundreds of thousands of years. We are familiar with being the most dangerous thing in our environment. Impressive displays of power do not trigger fear in us. They trigger analysis and planning. We see your weapons and immediately begin calculating how to counter them, not how to surrender to them. Another human transmission was intercepted. This one, from a military strategic planning session. Human officers were calmly discussing tactics for fighting the hegemony fleet if it came to battle. They were not discussing how to survive or escape. They were discussing how to win. The siege cannons have a charge time of approximately 40 seconds based on the power readings, one human analyst was saying. That is enough time to close distance and target the weapons arrays directly. The antimatter torpedoes are powerful but slow. Point defense systems should be able to intercept most of them if we maintain proper spacing. The quantum destabilizers are the real threat, another voice added. But they seem to require multiple ships to fire simultaneously to create the cascade effect. If we can disrupt their formation, we reduce their effectiveness significantly. Zixthara realized with growing horror that the humans were not impressed by hegemony power. They were studying it for weaknesses. While his fleet was trying to inspire fear, the humans were preparing for war with the calm professionalism of experienced soldiers. Captain Park, Zixthara said slowly, are you telling me that nothing we have shown you has caused fear? Park considered the question carefully. Your technology is impressive, Grand Admiral. Your weapons are powerful. Your fleet is large. But no, they have not caused fear. If you wanted to destroy us, you would have attacked already. Instead, you are talking, which means you believe we have value alive. That gives us negotiating position, not reasons to be afraid. The communication ended, and Zixthara stood in silence on his bridge, trying to understand how 50,000 years of perfected intimidation had completely failed against a species that had barely left its own star system. The tension between the hegemony fleet and the human ships had reached a strange stalemate. Grand Admiral Zixthara was preparing to make a decision he had never needed to make before, whether to actually attack a species that refused to be intimidated. It would be costly, messy, and would undermine the entire foundation of hegemony expansion strategy. If word spread that intimidation had failed, other species might find courage to resist. Before he could give any orders, every sensor on every ship in both fleets suddenly screamed warnings simultaneously. Admiral, his sensor officer shouted, all four of his arms working frantically across his console. Dark space rupture detected. Multiple signatures emerging at the system's edge. The main view screen shifted to show the source of the disturbance. Space itself was tearing open. Massive wounds in reality through which something ancient and terrible was emerging. Zixthara felt his blood turn cold. He recognized those signatures. Every spacefaring species that had survived long enough learned to recognize them. Zilthok, he whispered. The Zilthok were the nightmare that haunted every species in the galaxy. They were not a civilization. They were a force of nature. A harvest that swept through populated space every few centuries. Their ships were not built. They were grown. Massive biological constructs that fed on intelligent life itself. Where the hegemony killed to conquer, the Zilthok consumed to survive. They did not negotiate. They did not communicate. They simply harvested entire regions of space, feeding on populations until nothing remained but empty worlds. The Zilthok fleet that emerged from dark space was smaller than the assembled hegemony armada. But size meant nothing against them. Their ships looked like massive organisms, all twisted organic shapes and pulsing biological systems. They had no decorations, no intimidation displays, no cultural elements at all. They were pure, predatory efficiency. All ships, defensive formation. Zixthara commanded, his voice tight with fear that was very real. Prepare to retreat to minimum safe distance. Across the hegemony fleet, panic spread. This was not a species they had come to intimidate. This was the predator that even predators feared. Ships began breaking formation, preparing to flee to the edge of the system where they could safely jump to faster than light speeds. On the human ships, the reaction was entirely different. Captain Park's voice cut through the communication channels with sharp authority. All human vessels. Combat formation Delta. Weapons to full power. Someone get me tactical data on those ships immediately. Zixthara watched in disbelief as the human fleet, instead of fleeing, tightened their formations and moved forward. The casual, amused attitude that had frustrated him for hours was completely gone. The human ships moved with military precision, taking up positions between the Xilthok and the hegemony fleet. Captain Park, Zixthara transmitted, you do not understand what you face. The Xilthok cannot be reasoned with. They cannot be intimidated. They consume entire civilizations. Your only chance is to flee. Park's face appeared on screen, and Zixthara saw something that chilled him more than the Xilthok arrival. The human was not smiling anymore. His expression was cold, focused, and utterly without fear or amusement. We know what they are, Admiral, Park said quietly. We have encountered their scout ships before, 3 years ago on the edge of our space. They tried to harvest one of our colony worlds. We killed them all. That is impossible, Zixthara said. No species fights the Xilthok successfully. We are not most species, Park replied. All hegemony ships. We are transmitting tactical data now. Their biological hulls are resistant to energy weapons, but vulnerable to kinetic impact. Their regeneration cores are located here, here, and here. Targeting data flooded the hegemony communication networks. If you want to survive this, you follow our lead. The Xilthok fleet began moving forward, their ships pulsing with sickening organic rhythm. They had detected the concentration of intelligent life in the system and were moving to harvest it. To them, it did not matter that some ships were human and some were hegemony. All were food. Admiral, his tactical officer said urgently, the human ships are moving to intercept. They are placing themselves between us and the Xilthok. Zixthara could not process what he was seeing. The prey species, the ones they had come to intimidate into submission, were positioning themselves to protect the hegemony fleet. It violated everything he understood about galactic politics and species interaction. The Xilthok opened fire first. Massive bioplasma weapons that could melt through conventional shielding lanced out toward the human ships. The humans did not even try to dodge. Their shields absorbed the impact, flaring bright, and they returned fire immediately. Human weapons were different from hegemony technology. Where the hegemony used sophisticated energy weapons and exotic matter warheads, human weapons were brutally simple. Mass accelerators that fired projectiles at relativistic speeds. Missiles with overwhelming kinetic energy. Focused explosives designed to shatter rather than disintegrate. The first Xilthok ship that took a direct hit from a human mass accelerator did not explode or disintegrate. It cracked. The biological hull, designed to regenerate from energy damage, could not heal from the massive physical trauma of having a projectile tear through its entire structure. They know how to fight them, Zixthara's tactical officer said with wonder. The humans actually know how to kill Xilthok. Park's voice came through on an open channel, broadcasting to all ships in both fleets. His tone was clipped and professional. The voice of someone who had done this before. Human fleet, pattern gamma. Hegemony ships, if you are going to fight, focus your fire on targets we have already damaged. Do not waste energy trying to punch through fresh hulls. Aim for the organic seams we are opening. One of Zixthara's junior officers looked at him with desperate hope. Admiral? Orders? Zixthara made a decision that would have been unthinkable an hour ago. All ships, follow human tactical commands. Focus fire as they direct. We fight together, or we die together. The hegemony fleet moved into formation alongside the human ships. It was awkward and improvised. Two military forces that had never worked together, trying to coordinate in the middle of a battle. But the humans adapted quickly, adjusting their tactics to account for hegemony capabilities. A Xilthok harvester ship moved toward one of the hegemony dreadnoughts, its biological tendrils extending to begin the consumption process. Before it could make contact, 3 human ships intercepted it, their weapons tearing into the organic hull with calculated brutality. Hegemony Dreadnought Valor's call, "Pull back and recharge your shields," Park transmitted. "We have got this one." Zixthara watched as the humans fought with a style he had never seen before. They were not trying to win elegantly or efficiently. They were trying to kill, pure and simple. Their ships took damage that would make other species retreat, but they kept fighting. When shields failed, they kept firing. When hulls were breached, they rerouted power and continued the attack. One human ship, its entire port side torn open by bioplasma fire, deliberately rammed a Zilthok harvester. The collision destroyed both ships, but it also disrupted the Zilthok formation long enough for other human vessels to exploit the opening. "Captain Park's ship is taking heavy damage," a hegemony officer reported. "Their shields are down to 15%. Zixthara looked at the tactical display. Park's vessel, the diplomatic ship that had started this entire encounter, was positioned at the most dangerous point in the battle. It was drawing fire from multiple Zilthok ships to protect a damaged hegemony cruiser that was trying to retreat. "All ships in range," Zixthara commanded. "Focus fire on the Zilthok targeting Captain Park." Now, the hegemony fleet responded immediately. Dozens of ships turned their weapons on the Zilthok vessels threatening the human captain. Energy beams and matter torpedoes hammered into targets that human kinetic weapons had already wounded. The combined fire was devastating. The Zilthok, facing unexpected resistance and losing ships faster than they could harvest new resources, began to retreat. Their biological vessels pulled back toward the dark space ruptures they had emerged from, withdrawing to find easier prey elsewhere. As the last Zilthok ship disappeared into dark space, an exhausted silence fell over both fleets. Human ships were heavily damaged. Several completely destroyed. But they had held the line, and more importantly, they had protected the hegemony fleet that had come to intimidate them. Zixthara opened a channel to Captain Park. The human appeared on screen, his uniform torn, and his face covered in soot from internal fires. His ship's bridge was a disaster, with exposed wiring and damaged consoles visible behind him. "Captain Park," Zixthara said slowly, "you positioned your ships to protect us. Why?" Park looked tired, but his eyes were steady. "Because the Zilthok were the real threat, Admiral. You are just trying to expand your territory and maintain control. That is politics. The Zilthok consume entire civilizations. That is genocide. We know the difference. Your species fights very differently than we expected," Zixthara admitted. "You saw us laugh at your intimidation and thought we could not be dangerous," Park said. "But humans learned a long time ago that the things trying to look scary, usually, are not the real threat. The Zilthok do not bother with displays, or warnings, or psychological warfare. They just attack. That is what real danger looks like. That is when we stop laughing." Human ships were conducting repairs while hegemony vessels stood by, uncertain of what would happen next. The intimidation protocol had failed completely, but something far more significant had replaced it. Respect earned through shared combat. Grand Admiral Zixthara sat in his command chair, reviewing the battle recordings for the 3rd time. What he saw challenged everything he thought he knew about warfare and human nature. The humans had not just fought effectively. They had fought with a brutality and determination that went beyond military necessity. When their shields failed, they kept fighting. When their ships were damaged, they used those damaged ships as weapons. When faced with impossible odds, they adapted and pushed forward. But it was not mindless aggression. Every move had been calculated. Every sacrifice had served a purpose. The humans fought like they had done this before, many times, against enemies far worse than a hegemony intimidation fleet. "Admiral," his xenocultural advisor said quietly, "I have completed a deeper analysis of human military history. I think you should see this." I. The Peltharian scholar displayed data that painted a disturbing picture of humanity. Their entire evolutionary history was warfare. Not just species against species, but humans against their own planet, against each other, against every obstacle they encountered. Humans have been at war for their entire recorded history, the advisor explained. Not occasional wars like most species, but constant, continuous conflict. They have fought each other, their environment, diseases, predators, and now other species. War is not an aberration for them. It is their natural state. Zixthara watched recordings of human history. Empires rising and falling. Technologies developed specifically to kill more efficiently. Entire philosophies built around the concept of organized violence. Even their entertainment and art were filled with conflict and combat. But they also cooperate, the advisor continued. That is the truly dangerous part. Humans are simultaneously highly competitive and highly cooperative. They can fight each other viciously and then unite instantly against an external threat. They have what they call armies, massive organizations built entirely around the concept of coordinated violence. Most species that reach space travel have moved beyond such things, Zixthara said. Exactly. Most species develop cooperation first, then technology. Humans develop technology to make their warfare more effective, and then use that warfare capability to reach space. They are an apex predator species that never stopped being predators even as they gained intelligence. Captain Park's face appeared on the communication screen, interrupting the analysis. He looked slightly better than before. His uniform changed, and the soot washed from his face. But his expression remained serious. Grand Admiral, we need to talk about what happens next. Zixthara straightened in his chair. I agree. The original purpose of my visit here has become complicated. That is one way to put it, Park said with a slight smile that did not reach his eyes. You came to intimidate us into submission. We laughed at you. Then, we fought beside you. I suspect this is not how these situations usually proceed. It is not, Zixthara admitted. I will be honest with you, Captain Park. I do not know what to do now. My protocol has failed, but I cannot simply leave. The Hegemony Council will expect results. Park nodded. Then let me help you understand something about humans that your protocol did not account for. We laughed at your intimidation display, not because we thought you were weak. We laughed because your methods were ineffective against our psychology. I understand that now, Zixthara said. But you do not understand why, Park continued. Humans spent hundreds of thousands of years as hunter-gatherers on a death world. We learned to recognize real threats versus performance threats. Real predators do not roar before they attack. Real danger does not announce itself. Your display told us you were not an immediate threat, which made us relax. And the Zilthok? Zixthara asked. The Zilthok are a real threat. They do not negotiate. They do not intimidate. They consume. When we encountered their scouts 3 years ago, they attacked our colony without warning. They killed 80,000 people before we could respond. We learned to fight them because we had no choice. Park's expression became harder. We tracked those scouts back to their staging area and destroyed it. We hunted down every Zilthok ship in that region of space and killed them all. Not because we wanted to, but because we understood that letting them escape meant they would return to harvest more of our people. That level of violence against the Zilthok is unprecedented, Zixthara said quietly. Is it? Or is it just that most species do not have experience being the most dangerous thing in their environment? Park leaned forward. Admiral, let me tell you what humans are. We are persistence predators who evolved to hunt prey to exhaustion across vast distances. We are pack hunters who learn to coordinate complex strategies. We are tool users who developed weapons before we developed agriculture. And most importantly, we are survivors who lived through countless near extinctions and kept going. He gestured to the damaged human ships visible on the display. You saw us fight the Zilthok. That is what humans look like when we stop being amused and start being dangerous. We do not fight to look impressive. We do not fight for glory or honor. We fight to win. And we keep fighting until either we win or we are dead. Zixthara felt a chill run through him. You are saying that your species is naturally violent. Vix. No. Park said firmly. I am saying that we are naturally determined. Violence is just one tool we use when necessary. But here is what you need to understand about humans. We prefer cooperation to conflict. We would rather build than destroy. We choose peace when we can. But, Zixthara prompted, hearing the unspoken word, but when peace is not an option. When we are threatened, or when those under our protection are in danger, we are very, very good at violence. Because we have practiced it for our entire existence as a species. Park stood up, his posture formal. So here is humanity's answer to your ultimatum, Grand Admiral. We will not submit to the hegemony. We will not accept your authority over our worlds. But we are also willing to establish diplomatic relations, trade agreements, and mutual defense pacts. Today proved that we can fight together effectively. When necessary. The Council will not accept that, Zixthara said, though his voice lacked conviction. The Council will accept whatever you tell them, Park replied. You are the Grand Admiral. You have the authority to negotiate terms, and I think if you are honest with yourself, you know that trying to conquer humanity through force would be far more costly than establishing us as allies. Zixthara considered this. He thought about the battle, about how human ships had positioned themselves to protect hegemony vessels, even after being threatened with extinction. He thought about the cold efficiency with which they fought the Zilthok, and the disturbing realization that if humans decided to fight the hegemony with that same determination, it would be a devastating conflict for both sides. What you are proposing is unprecedented, he said finally. No species has ever refused the hegemony and remained independent. Then we will be the first, Park said simply. Admiral, you came here with weapons meant to intimidate. You showed us power designed to make us afraid. But humans do not fear power. We respect capability when it is proven through action, not through display. And we proved our capability today, Zixthara said slowly, understanding dawning. You did. You fought well beside us. Your weapons, while designed more for show than efficiency, were still effective when properly deployed. Your crew adapted quickly to a tactical situation they were not prepared for. You have earned respect through your actions. Park smiled, and this time it reached his eyes. The difference is that respect leads to cooperation. Fear leads to resentment and eventual rebellion. You cannot maintain an empire of thousands of species through intimidation alone. Eventually, someone will resist. And if your protocol fails, you have no backup plan. You are suggesting we change our entire expansion strategy, Zixthara said. I am suggesting that you already have, at least for humanity. We will not submit, but we will work with you. We will share technology, coordinate defense, engage in trade, and help protect hegemony space from threats like the Zilthok. But we do so as equals, not as subjects. Zixthara made a decision that would probably end his military career, but might save countless lives. I will present your terms to the Council as a new model for hegemony expansion. Species that prove themselves capable of contributing to mutual defense will be offered partnership rather than submission. They might not accept it, Park warned. They might not. But after today, I understand something important. Humanity is not going to be the last species that your intimidation fails against. Your psychological makeup is unusual, but not unique. Eventually, the hegemony will encounter another species that does not respond to fear the way we expect. Better to have a diplomatic alternative ready than to stumble into a war we are not prepared for. That is wisdom, Admiral, Park said. As Zixthara prepared to leave, his communication officer spoke up one last time. Admiral, one of our intelligence analysts has a question about human culture that is bothering him. What is it, sir? If humans find our intimidation displays amusing because they look like they're Halloween decorations, and Halloween is a celebration where they seek out scary things for entertainment, does that mean humans were actually enjoying being threatened? There was a long pause. Then, from the human ships, they heard the sound that had started this entire strange encounter. Captain Park was laughing again. "Admiral," Park said when he could speak, "I want to be clear about something. We were not laughing because we enjoyed being threatened. We were laughing because your threat was not threatening. It was the galactic equivalent of someone jumping out and yelling boo when we can see their shadow. It is funny because it is trying so hard to be scary and missing completely. So if we had simply attacked without warning, without the display?" Zixthara asked. Park's laughter stopped. His expression became serious again. "Then we would not have had time to laugh. We would have been too busy fighting. And that, Admiral, is exactly my point. Things that are actually dangerous do not need to announce themselves. They just act." The human ships began moving toward the edge of the system, preparing to return to Earth space. The hegemony fleet watched them go, no longer certain whether humanity was the prey species they had come to intimidate or the predator they should have been negotiating with from the start. On the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, one young officer turned to his commander. "Admiral, what do we tell the Council about what happened here?" Zixthara watched the human ships disappear into faster-than-light travel, thinking about species that turned fear into entertainment, that fought with brutal efficiency when needed, and that somehow managed to be both amusing and terrifying depending on the situation. "We tell them the truth," he said finally. "We encountered a species that does not respond to intimidation. We attempted a show of force. They laughed at us. Then we fought together against a real threat, and they proved to be the most effective combat species we have ever encountered. We also tell them that humanity has declined to join the hegemony, but is open to alliance as equals. And if the Council orders us to attack them anyway?" the officer asked quietly. Zixthara remembered human ships positioning themselves to protect hegemony vessels. He remembered the cold efficiency of human warfare. He remembered Captain Park's words about humans fighting until they won or died. "Then we tell the Council that such an attack would be costly, protracted, and ultimately pointless. Because humans do not surrender, they do not intimidate, and they apparently find war to be just another problem to solve. Better to have them as allies than as enemies." As his ship prepared to jump back to hegemony space, Zixthara looked one last time at the recordings of the human Halloween celebration. Children dressed as monsters, laughing and playing, adults decorating their homes with skulls and death imagery for fun. He finally understood. Humans had domesticated fear itself. They had taken the thing that controlled every other species and turned it into entertainment. That was not a species you could intimidate. That was a species you had to respect. And respect, Zixthara was learning, was far more valuable than fear anyway.